Hello and welcome to Landscape Photography World, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne and I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, likes and dislikes. Beth Buelow, a passionate landscape and abstract photographer from Michigan, is my guest this week to discuss her philosophy behind her art, business and podcasts. Beth has established herself as the introvert entrepreneur to a growing tribe of thousands of followers and fans. A professional speaker and certified coach, Beth has coached dozens of introverted clients, trained hundreds and spoken to thousands, championing introvert strengths and establishing her expertise in entrepreneurship, communication and leadership. Extremely popular podcast, The Introvert Entrepreneur, features interviews with well-known and emerging introvert entrepreneurs. Since its launch in August 2010, the 50-plus episodes collectively have been downloaded more than 1.6 million times. She has now launched her own photography and creativity podcast, Pixels, dedicated to the ethical, aesthetic and philosophical aspects of photography with her guests. In this episode, Beth discusses her evolution from classical music to photography, influenced by a Kodak 110mm camera in her childhood, and a rekindling of her passion inspired by a friend's photo on Facebook. She elaborates on her style transformation towards abstract photography, her inspirations and challenges in experimenting with new techniques. She also talks about her experiences with workshops, the importance of patience and persistence in running a photography business, and the value of authenticity in a world influenced by AI and social media. I hope you enjoy the show. G'day, Beth. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. How are you going?
I'm good. How are you, Grant? I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm very happy to have you on. I've watched a few of your episodes of your podcast and on YouTube, and I'm really excited to have you on because I'm interested to talk to you not just about the podcast and so forth, but a lot about your photography and why you're a photographer, etc. So why don't we start with that question and say
Oh boy.
why do you do landscape photography?
Yeah. It's interesting because of why I do photography. So you use the word landscape, and I know this is landscape photography, right?
Yep.
And landscape photography to me is a relatively new addition to what I do. So to backtrack, you said, why am I a photographer, right? And oh, I guess lots of reasons. It's kind of summed up in the tagline or phrase that I like to use on social media and whatnot that embodies my philosophy, which is if you're not amazed, you're not paying attention.
Yep.
And photography for me is how I have, it's the expression through which I have discovered that I can be the most amazed, if that makes sense, and
That
be
makes a
able
lot of
to
sense.
train my eye towards the things that amaze me and to share that with others. Because I think we're often not seeing all of what is truly amazing. I keep using that word, but truly amazing around us. Like we numb ourselves sometimes, or we just stop seeing. And it's not it's not because we're indifferent or don't care.
Sure.
It's just that we just get used to a routine and used to seeing things the way they are. And we don't step back and say, wow, look at this leaf or look at this sunset. We've seen a million sunsets, but sit and look at it and think
Yeah.
about it. So for me, photography and why I do it is it just is it's a way of expressing what I'm seeing, and I get excited, and it's an easy way and it's an exciting way to share it with others. And if I can help somebody else look at something differently next time, then that's success.
Fantastic. I love the sound of that. So where did it all start? You obviously, nobody comes out of the womb a accomplished photographer. So how did you pick up a camera first, and where did it all start for you?
Yeah. I don't know how old I was, but my first camera was a Kodak 110.
Hmm.
And so it had the cartridge film, and I had to go and buy like the little flash cubes
Yeah, the
that go
little
on the
cubes that
top.
rotated around. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I loved that. And I remember distinctly feeling very grown up going to the store and buying this. And I was probably, I don't know, 10 or 11, something
Yeah.
like that.
Hmm.
So pretty early. And I don't remember what, I probably was just taking pictures of the cat and the car in the driveway and mundane kinds of things and my friends and whatnot. And I've always felt like I needed to document things through photography. So
Yeah.
that was like the first portion of things, like from age 10 to age 20.
Hmm.
It was like more documenting my life. And my training is as a musician. So my formal education is as a classical musician. I played clarinet. And so clarinet became my mode of expression for many years. And then I moved away from that and I moved into nonprofit administration and whatnot. So the camera was there, but not really in the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm guessing a lot of people who stepped away from grew up taking photos and loved it and whatnot, and then stepped away from it, have some sort of story about how they came back to it. So probably every photographer that had an early start in photography and really loved it, but then moved away from it, probably has a re-entry story or something that was
Sure,
that
sure.
catalyst that brought them back. And and for me, it was, and this is, it sounds so funny, but a friend of mine on Facebook posted a picture she had taken of a dandelion.
Okay.
And there was something, it was a macro, and she's not a photographer. I think she probably took it with her phone.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
was something about it there. I was like, I want to try to do that. That's so cool. And so it caused me to get a camera again. And I think I went to the I went to the local like big box store or something.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
just got like a Kodak digital point and shoot kind of thing and started playing with that. And then maybe the next year, my husband and I went to Hawaii. And I was completely taken by the landscape, by the ocean, the palm trees, the flowers, the beautiful plants. And I was constantly taking pictures. And that's when it's like a switch was flipped.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, I was wanting to take photos all the time. Something just clicked. And ever since then, I've just gradually been building up my skills, expanding my vision, trying to find my vision,
Sure.
and investing in it and investing in myself. So, yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about that investment, but before we do, let's talk a little bit about finding your style. How are you going
Mhm.
about that, and where are you, or where do you see yourself on that journey?
Yeah. I I started out after that Hawaii experience. I found myself really drawn to botanicals and specifically dahlias,
Mhm.
flowers, but dahlias. There's so many varieties. They're so beautiful. They're so photogenic, and I just got hooked. And so that was my point of entry to trying to figure out what made my way of taking those photos different than somebody else. And I'd say pretty much from the get go, I was taking a more abstract approach.
Sure, sure.
And that has only increased over time. And so I went from being what I thought was going to be maybe a little bit more literal, but taking an artistic perspective, to going a little bit abstract, to now my favorite photos are if somebody can't tell what it is that I'm photographing.
Yep. No.
So I feel like it's mostly gone in that abstract direction, whether that's landscapes, architecture. I love architecture photography, abstract or fine art architecture photography. And yeah, so that's so it's been when it comes to what is my voice, I don't know that I have necessarily found it yet. It's interesting to me because occasionally on Instagram I'll post something and somebody will comment, I knew it was yours before I saw the caption or saw who
Yeah,
posted it. And I think, how did they know? Would you tell me how you knew?
yeah.
So
I like to know.
I yeah, I feel like maybe there's something there. I just haven't been able to quite put
Mm.
my finger on it. And so that's something I'm still trying to discover because we're so close to our work that we
Yeah.
can't always see the same thing that other people from the outside can see.
No, and I think also people, when they're starting out through that journey of discovery of what their style is or what different styles they're going to incorporate into their work, they're looking at what they're doing and going, okay, where I started is nowhere near where I am now. And
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
things that I'm looking at and the way that I look at them is completely different. So I think that
Yeah.
evolution is probably for me one of the most interesting things that we talk about on this show is how people's style actually evolves and how people's way of looking at the world has evolved
Hmm.
from where they started to where they are now. And I love the fact that you're really taking that abstract view because, again, it's something that fascinates me. The architecture stuff as well as always been a bit of a fascination. And for me, I incorporate architecture into landscape because for me,
Hmm.
natural landscape is one landscape, seascape and that, and the skyscape and the cityscape or the
Hmm.
urbanscape or suburbanscape or wherever you happen to be. They're all
Yeah.
landscapes that we exist in and live in, and the way that you look at them and see them and the way that you actually capture them is really the point of fascination for me.
Yeah. What you're saying is reminding me that one of the things I feel like I've been fairly clear since I started is that I am not an epic landscape
Sure.
person. I appreciate those epic scenes and the grand sweeping vistas and all of that, but maybe it's my more introverted nature, but I home in on details and
Yeah.
much more about the small scenes, which are also a form of landscape,
Yeah, absolutely.
but really more in that small and intimate scenes. I know you've interviewed Sarah Marino, and
Yeah, yeah,
she's always the person that comes to mind when it comes to that, even though there are many others doing it. But that's one thing I feel like I have been clear in my voice that it's that that is something that I leave for others to do only the way they can do it so wonderfully.
yeah.
And yeah.
So where do you think your inspiration comes from? What are the things that amaze you, the things that you go, oh, that's what I'm really into right now?
Gosh, sometimes it's color, sometimes it's a line, sometimes it's light. And if I just in that spirit of talking about what are the themes or things that we notice in our work, I'm drawn to curves. I'm drawn to organic sort of movement. I, I and and those not like micro details, but just the things that we overlook, and trying to see the familiar in different ways. So like right now, I'm looking up because I'm looking at a photo on the wall that I took of water, but you wouldn't guess it was water because I've used intentional camera movement
Hmm.
and swished it around. And so it makes me think, yeah, I'm just thinking about this out loud. what is, I get excited about the possibility in something.
Sure, sure.
So water has infinite possibility. A
Absolutely.
building often has infinite possibility. So
Mm.
that's part of it's like a treasure hunt. So that's what gets me excited. And that's what I find so amazing is there's all this potential right under our noses all the time. And we overlook it. So I think that's what I'm, that's what gets me excited is when I see potential.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. Are you a goal setter in your photography? Do you go out with a lot of intention or are you more reactive in your work?
Oh, it's so funny you say reactive because I was just talking with someone the other day and she described herself as reactive. And I thought, and just to back up, I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily intentional in that I have pre-visualized or I've
Hmm.
planned in a particular way. Like the most I might do is say, oh, it's going to be cloudy today, so it would be a good day to go
Sure,
here.
sure.
Or I don't want to go at this time of day or something. But otherwise, I try to just stay open and stay curious.
Yeah, yeah.
But when this person I was talking to said reactive, I thought, am I reactive? And then I thought, you know what the word is for me is responsive.
Uh-huh.
So
Yep.
I'm responding to what I'm seeing and trying to be in relationship to it in some way
Yeah.
and just seeing what speaks to me. And it at some point, and this has been very liberating, going to an art museum.
Yep.
And sometimes I feel like if I go into a room and there's four walls and there's art, I have to stop at each one.
Hmm.
And at some point, I just said, no, I don't have to do that. I don't have to give equal attention to everything. I can just let my eye wander, see what pulls me, and go there.
Yeah, sure.
And that's going to be a much more fulfilling experience. And so I think that's the same um, relationship I have to going out and photographing is what pulls me
Yeah,
in
yeah,
that moment.
yeah. Awesome. In terms of your work, and we've talked a bit about having or not having pre-visualization and goals and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Do you set yourself projects though? And are there any
Mm,
sort of portfolio pieces that you're saying, okay, I want more of this or more of that
mm,
in my portfolio?
mm-hmm. I'm still figuring that out.
Sure.
I have done like small projects before, and I find it very helpful. For instance, I took an ICM workshop, a virtual workshop a few years ago, and part of the output of that workshop was a series of 6 images. And I found it really helped me to focus
Hmm.
my energy. It helped me to fine tune my perception in different ways.
Yep.
And that sort of that opened up the gates to forming to creating more triptychs and diptychs and
Sure.
sets of six and whatnot. So I've done it on a small scale, and that has mostly been responsive or reactive.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
I'll see in my portfolio, oh, there's a theme here, and these would look good together.
Hmm.
Only occasionally have I been out and thought intentionally, oh, this would make a good series. So I'm going to try different try to shoot, I don't like that word, try to take photographs with that in mind.
Sure.
So yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
Yeah, yeah.
that's
No,
what I
it's all good.
want.
It's all good. I'm interested also in uh, doing abstract work. That you tend to have to experiment a little bit in both
Mhm.
the technical side of what settings you're using, et cetera, but also the way that you're positioning the camera and how you're actually working with the light. Have you
Mhm.
ever had experiences in that experimentational phase of your work where you go, yeah, it's not working? How do you deal with that disappointment, and how do you deal with the times when that experimentation, which always comes with failure, that you go,
Mhm.
yeah, I need to adjust, I need to change something here?
Well, you use two words that jump out at me: disappointment and failure. And part of my response to that and how I avoid those things is by avoiding those concepts.
Sure.
Not not to have this Pollyanna, everything is good,
Hmm.
lemons and lemonade and all that kind of stuff. But I've been thinking a lot about this lately because one of the other hats I wear in life is as a coach.
Yep.
And so I'm very tuned into language and the mindset that we carry when we're doing our work. And and I think especially with abstract, it has I feel like it gives us more permission to play, to experiment, to do things that don't turn out the way we want them to.
Sure.
And so because I I learn the technical side of things on an as needed, need to know basis.
Yep. Yep.
So didn't learn about multiple exposure until I wanted to do multiple exposure, and then I learned about it, or whatever the settings or technical side might be. And so I try to keep that mindset of play and non-attachment. And that kind of goes to intention. So that's one reason I feel like I don't necessarily have a set idea when I go out. It's
Mm.
more of a what if. I wonder what will happen if I do this. What if I do that? What if I get down here? What if I set it on continuous shooting and ICM and multiple exposure? So if I am open, then I am not setting myself up for disappointment, because
Yeah.
disappointment comes if I'm expecting a certain outcome and I don't get it. If I'm open to whatever the outcome is, I'm not going to be disappointed. I will look at something and say, that's a mess. Oh,
It worked.
yeah, that doesn't look good. And I try to think about, okay, what about that doesn't work and what do I need to adjust, and just keep experimenting and shifting things. And what's interesting is sometimes the thing that I think is a mess, I get it back, I'll put it into Lightroom, I'll
Yep.
tinker with it, and I'm like, huh, okay, actually, there's something there.
Mm.
So that's the other thing that's helped me to release that in the field judgment of, ooh, that's really bad,
Yeah.
because we can only tell so much by looking
At the back of the camera.
at the playback.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
If you go
yeah.
back to the film days, you couldn't look at the back of the camera.
You couldn't look.
You had to wait until you got at least the negatives done. So,
Yeah, and then oh boy, yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, I think a lot of it is just it's mindset of how do you want to be in relationship to it, and taking a more playful and open, non-attached approach.
Yeah. And I think that's a really marvelous way of looking at it. And I use those words like disappointment and failure deliberately because some people
Mhm.
do have that pre
Yes.
idea about, okay, well, this is what I'm going to set out to do, and this is how I'm
Mhm.
going to go about it. And I am experimenting, but it didn't work.
Mhm.
So is that a failure, or is that a learning? What is it? And it's really about, that question is really about how people think about their photography more than anything.
Yeah, and I would think that especially for landscape photographers that are maybe doing the more traditional landscape, what if it rains? What if the road is washed out? What if, right?
Exactly.
Clouds move in. And so to me, it's a yes and. Yes, I might set out with a particular intention. I have an idea like, oh, I want fog and it looks like it's going to be foggy, and I want the sunset and I want this and that. And we can set ourselves up for success by doing our homework and saying, okay, if there's any chance of that happening, here's how I
Sure.
need to position myself. And so there's that yes. And then the and is, and if that doesn't happen, how can I stay open so that I see other possibilities that might be right there
Mm.
instead of just like packing it up and going home because whatever I visualized is not going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about the communication side of photography. Photography
Mm-hmm.
is a form of visual communication. Are you trying to tell stories with your
Mm,
photography? Some people don't. I'm just interested where you
yeah.
see your photography in that sort of communication medium.
This is one that's been an ongoing struggle for me as well,
Yeah,
especially as I lean into abstract, because
yeah,
abstract is less likely to have a literal story.
yeah.
The
You're
story,
leaving the interpretation entirely to the viewer, the more abstract you get.
exactly, exactly. And so I tend to think of the story as being abstract itself. So the story, it's just, and I know I'm not, I picked this up from someone else, and I'm sure it's not unique to me, but especially with abstract, I don't think of what's the subject
Yeah,
is not the object that was photographed.
yep,
The subject is the light, the color, the line, the movement, the flow, the whatever you might say. And that's where the story is. And if the subject is red, the story is in the red. And what do you see in red? How does that
yeah.
make you feel? What comes up for you? Is there a memory? Is there an emotion? Eh, and so maybe it's something of a cop out to, and some people would say, I've heard, I think it was actually Brooks Jensen. He did an episode where he talked about how basically, I think he was saying, like, if you say, oh, it's up to the viewer to interpret, that's a cop out.
I don't think it is.
That's,
Yeah,
but I don't, did you hear that episode?
I did
If I
actually.
interpret, so like, maybe I was over correcting what he was saying, because I don't think he was saying it was a complete cop out, but he was
So,
making a point. Like, it's the artist's responsibility to communicate what their intention was.
but
And,
communicating an
and
emotion, it can be quite different to communicating, as you
yes,
say, a literal story of saying, okay, well,
exactly.
whether it's a grand landscape which has a glacier sweeping through it, and the story is maybe the way that has shaped the land. So that's one way of
Right.
interpreting
Hmm.
a story. On the other hand, you might be focusing in, say, on a tiny detail of that glacier, and
Hmm.
that abstracted doesn't look like a glacier, doesn't look like anything, but it gives you a feeling.
And yeah, it depends on the kind of photographs. So thank you for adding that piece of clarification. The story is in the eye of the beholder. Unless there's something about the image that does communicate something that I want others to know.
Mm,
Like if it was a glacier, and even if it was abstracted, that there was some element of it, and I'm even doing it in the first place to call attention to something about that glacier.
yeah, yeah.
In that case, I might elaborate and say something about it. But yeah, I tend to leave that more to what other people see and what they want to experience from it,
Sure.
and be happy with that.
Yeah. I'm interested in how your visual communication and so forth flows into the podcast that you've got, and what you're doing, as we talked about earlier, is quite similar to some of what
Mhm,
goes on in this podcast in terms of
mhm.
exploring people's motivations and inspirations and so forth. I'm interested in how that sort of fits into your photographical world and how each side informs the other.
Yeah. You've noticed a number of times I've said in response to your question, like the first thing I'll say is, "Oh, I've been struggling with that," or "Oh, I've been
Yep,
thinking a
yep.
lot about that." So I see these conversations, whether I'm having one with you as like on the other side of the mic, or I'm um, initiating the conversation with someone. It's a wonderful way to continue that exploration and to keep being challenged by new ideas and different perspectives and different experiences. And so I feel like whenever I'm in conversation with another photographer on these kinds of topics, often I almost always come away with some sort of little click of clarity.
Yeah.
Oh, and I found this. I used to do another kind of podcast for 8 years or so, and I found myself, I always considered it a successful episode if I said something I'd never said before.
Right. Yep.
That there was some new intersection of information that would not have happened had I not been having that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I feel like that kind of another mode of expression, being the podcast, allows me to open up that some new pathways of thinking
Mm.
that help bring me some clarity. And you and I were talking before this that, like, one of the things we were talking about before we hit record was that in having these conversations where we as the interviewers are often asking questions that the person hasn't necessarily thought a lot about, or
Yeah.
maybe they haven't articulated it before or shared
Yeah.
it before. And to me, that's like doing a service to everybody. It's like a win. And so if
Absolutely.
somebody says, "Oh, I really had to think about that question. I hadn't thought about that before." That's yay. That's awesome.
Absolutely. They're my favorite
Because
parts is when somebody sits
yeah.
there and it may be it doesn't come out in the edit, but it may be silence for 5 minutes
Mhm.
while they actually chew through that in their head and go, "Wow, I've never actually thought about that."
Yeah, I think ever since I was a little girl, that's been my favorite thing is if I ask a question or make a statement, somebody's like, "Oh, nobody's ever asked me that before," or "I hadn't thought about that before." That's what gives me a little endorphin boost. So,
So where did the concept for doing the podcast start?
oh gosh, I'm not sure. It's, I was doing my other podcast, and I remember my podcast editor at the time, as he saw me getting more serious about photography, he was like, "Oh, you should do a photography podcast."
Okay.
And I said, "Oh, yeah, that might be interesting." And for me, especially at that time, podcast meant just audio, no
Yeah,
video. And I remember thinking, but photography is a visual medium. And so podcast doesn't excite me.
interesting.
And then I'm not sure what shifted, but I just got the idea where I was like, it would be cool to do interviews with photographers. And what I've landed on is that the channel is dedicated to the the ethical, aesthetic, and philosophical considerations of photography
Sure, sure.
and of creativity more broadly.
Yeah.
And so I TJ Thorne
Yes.
sent me a link to nature photography classes and Nick Stover, who has his
Okay.
inspired creator grants.
Hmm.
And I think I had said something to TJ about, "Oh, I've got this idea bouncing around in my head." And so he sent it and he said, "You might want to apply for this." And so I did, and I was awarded a grant.
Awesome.
And so that's enabled me to have a little bit of seed money to kickstart it. So that launched in April. It took longer than I thought it would, just to get it off the ground and get myself ready to go. But but that's how it started. And yeah, and some of it's selfish. I want to meet all these photographers. I want to ask them questions. So if we're going to do that, why don't we do it in front of other people
Absolutely.
and have everybody benefit from the conversation?
Yeah. To be honest, it's a bit like I've now been doing this for nearly 3 years, actually just a tick over 3 years, and it
Mm,
has been like a university class in photography, landscape
yeah,
bent, but yeah,
yeah.
it's been wonderful picking the brains of some of the best photographers out there and trying to understand not only the motivational, but also the business side of things, because I always like to try
Mm-hmm.
and explore, okay, so how did you make that leap from nine to
Mm,
five to here I
hmm.
am now? I'm a full-time photographer that's self-employed, and then how do you
Yeah,
wear all the hats? And so
yeah, yeah.
it's been absolutely wonderful getting that education personally, and hopefully share
Hmm.
that with lots of other people so that they get the same.
Yeah,
But
yeah, definitely.
in terms of photography as a business, where
Hmm.
is it for you? Is it part-time, full-time, on the edge? Where are you
Oh,
in the process?
I'm figuring that out. I feel like I'm answering a lot of your questions. I don't know
That's
yet.
okay.
Um,
It was exactly what we were just talking about.
yeah, it is. I've been I've been on my own self-employed for 16 years now as a coach. And so the entrepreneur side of things is very familiar to me, but it's only been in the past maybe 10, 11 months that I've been like, okay, if I do, I guess it's basically asking the question, do I want to
Yeah.
monetize? Do I want to professionalize my photography?
Mm.
I was thinking about this the other day because I took some pieces, actually not photography, but some other art that I had made to a gathering that I was at. And somebody said, oh, is this for sale? Can I buy it? And part of me is, oh, I'll just give it to you. But then I'm like, no, wait a minute. No. I like, as much as I am wanting more beauty in the world, as much as I want more people to see and be amazed by things, I also believe it has value. I think what we do has value. And I believe, and this comes from all these years of entrepreneurship, we value what we pay for.
Yeah,
We've all
absolutely.
heard that. And there's something energetically that feels good when there's an exchange of value.
Mm.
Money for expertise, money for time, money for art. It's honoring of what it is that you have produced. And it's saying,
Mm.
I value it, I value you. And so that's a long way of saying I've thought about that whole monetization thing. And I like selling art. I don't want to just give it away. I like that honoring and that exchange and relationship that comes with it. So I'm leaning towards, okay, how do I do that? And how do I do that in a way that's authentic for me? So I'm still doing my coaching and whatnot, but I've been trying to carve out more time for figuring out that business model and
Yeah. Yeah.
what's that going to look like. And I know I shouldn't say nobody gets rich off selling art because, of course, some people do.
Some people
Um,
try.
some people. And my desire to have an open and possibility oriented mindset doesn't let me say that is impossible. And we know from experience and anecdotally and talking to lots of people that that there's more to it than, oh, I just put up some pictures and people are going to buy them. Wouldn't that be nice?
That would be lovely.
Um, that
But
would be
yes, there is
lovely.
there,
And
and there's a lot of merit in what you're doing, I think, in thinking about it before pulling the ripcord. and taking that leap
Mm,
out of the plane and saying, okay, this is where I'm going now. You need
yeah.
to
And
actually make sure that you've got your parachute strapped on and
exactly, exactly. And then part of me is also, I'm not getting any younger. And so it's, if not now, when? And how
yeah,
can I do it responsibly? And fortunately, I suppose for me, I love to teach. I love to talk, even though I'm an introvert. I don't mind. I enjoy those things.
mm,
And how can this is part of figuring out the voice. So if I did a
yeah,
workshop, what would make my workshop different from somebody else's?
yep,
What can I offer that somebody would be willing to spend their time and money and energy on? Those are the kinds of questions I've been asking recently to try to figure that out. So if
mm,
anybody listening knows, you can just reach out to me and tell me, here's what I want to learn from you.
fantastic.
But I figure I'll find it, and I'm trying to focus again on that non-attachment.
Yeah,
I'm not like, oh, I must be making X number of dollars by this date or else it's never going to work or something like
yep,
that. I'm just, yeah, just I suppose it's a bit of a luxury or a privilege to be able to just say, I'm just going to keep showing up. I'm going to keep trying things. I'm going to see where my heart takes me. I'm going to see what seems to work on all levels,
yeah,
not just financially, but what works for me personally and energetically and artistically.
yeah, yeah. And I
So
think
figuring it out.
that's really important. So the thing we were talking a bit about the education that I've got. The
Hmm.
things, have a business plan. Think about how
Hmm.
you're actually going to do it before you pull the ripcord and do it. Make
Yeah.
sure that you have a financial buffer behind you that can cope with the
Hmm.
time that it's going to take you to get yourself to a position where you can say, oh, I can actually make money out of this consistently.
Yes. Yes.
And diversify. Make sure that
Hmm.
you don't only have one income stream, because if you only have that one income stream, then it makes it very
You're in
difficult to
trouble.
be consistent.
Yeah. One of the things I've thought about is I love doing event photography, not weddings, not
Yep.
that kind of, no, um, but more casual events and a big birthday party or an anniversary or a graduation party or that sort. I've done all of those kinds of things, family reunion, something where they need somebody to be that fly on the wall and capturing all those candid moments and that sort of thing. I actually enjoy that. But if I can't make that my entire revenue model because, for instance, 2 weeks ago, I was tackled by my dog and my knee is now probably needing surgery.
Wow.
And if my entire income was dependent on doing event photography, which is very physical, I would be in a mess. So, yes, that could be one aspect of it, but I need to be able to put that on ice and do other things.
Sure, sure.
So we think oh, that we don't think ahead sometimes, like
Yeah.
what are some of the things that might get in the way of me being able to do that. So if I went all in on event photography and then I blew out my knee, you know, I'd be lost. But
Yeah.
so anyway, I just offer that as a cautionary tale to not put all your eggs in one basket because you just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to just bring it back also to something that you've learnt from being
Mm-hmm.
your own boss and being your own,
Mm-hmm.
I all of those hats that you have to put on.
Yeah.
What's the most important thing you've learnt through running your own business?
I'd say there are two things. One is patience and persistence.
Hmm.
Those two things go together. Everything takes longer than you think it's going to,
Hmm.
and you have to be more persistent than you think you're going to have to or that you want to be. there's a great quote. I don't remember if it's Abraham Lincoln or Mark Twain or somebody, but it says something about success is usually right around the corner just before people give up
Yep.
or just after people give up.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be patient and you've got to be persistent. You have to remember other people are not working on your timeline. It's not nearly as important to anyone else as it is to you. That's just the harsh truth.
Yep.
So it sounds a little cliche, but you have to develop something of that thicker skin to be able to just be patient and just be politely persistent.
Yeah.
It's going to take more knocks on the door than you think it will.
Definitely.
And then I had a second one that came up and now I'm drawing a blank. It was, oh, ask for help.
Yes.
Ask for help.
Yeah.
Don't try to be Lone Ranger about everything.
Mm.
And this is coming from an introvert who will try everything I can to figure it out myself
Yep.
and
Yep.
to do it myself before asking somebody for help. And part of some of that's ego. Some of it is that it'll take a while to explain to somebody else what I want, how I want it done. I could just do it myself. Scarcity of scarcity thinking around finances. Sometimes it's a very real, like if the money's not there, the money's not there. But sometimes the money is there and we have this scarcity around it. And we're like, I couldn't possibly hire somebody to help me with this because it would cost this money. But then we have to think about the way somebody else put it for me was like, if you end up doing all of these sort of admin tasks, you're
Yep.
going to be like the highest paid admin in the world. Whereas if you could pay somebody else to do it, that frees up your time to go earn money. And it's
Yeah.
there's that
You
old
need
saying, you
to
have to spend money to make money.
make money. Yeah. You need to invest in yourself and in your own
Yeah.
ability and
Hmm.
concentrate on the abilities that you have that you're good at, and the
Yeah.
ones that you either don't want to do, and sometimes you have to, but that some of
Right.
those things that you don't want to do or aren't as value adding to your business, you need to outsource and
Hmm.
get somebody else to come and do
Yeah.
for you. Yeah.
Yeah. So ask for help and ask for help. And in terms of mentoring, ask for a lot of people are more generous than you think they're going to be. We preemptively say no when we don't even ask.
Yeah.
A lot of times people are more than happy to offer a piece of advice or answer a question. You don't want to take advantage of that.
No.
You want to honor their time. And my thing is, yes, you can pick my brain, but that's what I do for a living. And so I'll do it to a certain extent. And then after that, here's how you can hire me for that.
Yeah. But
Um,
you don't go to your doctor and say, "What's wrong with me, doctor? I'm not going to pay you."
mhm.
Or go to a
Right,
lawyer, "I have a
right.
legal problem and I want you to give me some legal advice," and not pay them. A, they won't do
Right.
it.
No.
B,
No, they won't.
it's exactly what you said. You're not honoring their skill set that you're going
Right.
to them to dip into. And yeah,
Yeah.
it is all about, as you say, honoring the skills of the person that are that you're working with.
Yeah. So I'll just say really quickly, honor theirs and honor your own.
Absolutely.
That's one thing I learned is you can only get so many emails where somebody says, "Hey, can I take you to virtual coffee and pick your brain about XYZ?" And it's like I said, that's what people hire me for. So, start to understand, and even with photography, oh, could you come and take photos at my 2-year old's birthday party? And you're like, oh, yeah, that would be pretty easy. And then before you know it, it's
Ends up being
you
20 or
have
30
to,
hours of work.
Yeah, and they're difficult or whatever. The here's the to sum it up, there's a saying, and I don't know where it comes from, but you teach people how to treat you.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you are teaching them that you don't have boundaries, that you're giving it away, that you'll always give extra and not draw any lines around it or charge more or whatever, that's how they'll treat you.
Yeah.
And you'll just get more of that. So to be aware of if you're finding that people are not treating you well, and I don't mean this to blame the person, but there is an opportunity to just look at things and say, okay, so what signals am I sending? What am
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
teaching them about how to treat me? And as a result of that, what do I need to adjust?
Yeah. You get back from the world what you put out into it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about photography a little bit more. I'm really interested in how where you live has shaped your photography, not only what you shoot, but also how you
Mm-hmm.
shoot. How do you think that has played a part in your learning how to go into the abstract world and
Mm-hmm.
start to develop the style that you're developing?
Yeah. So I live in the Midwest in the United States, in Michigan, and it's beautiful. The Midwest is beautiful. It has
Yep.
lots of geographic variety. I did spend 10 years out in the Pacific Northwest in
Yep.
Washington State, which has a very different topography in lots of ways, but also there's some similarities.
Yeah.
Um, but the Midwest is not exactly a landscape photographer's dream, right?
Depends on what you're looking
Um,
for.
it depends on exactly, it depends on what you're looking for. And, but you don't get, it's like when you think landscape photography, a lot of people are like Iceland and England and
Yeah.
Australia, New
Well,
Zealand,
the Rockies, the Tetons, all of that.
yeah, Colorado, go out to the West in the United States or
Sure.
all of that. And so we don't have the iconic landscapes. Maybe that's the way of putting it.
Sure. Sure.
And it probably is part of why I'm drawn to small scenes.
Hmm.
Like I can take a picture in the alley across the street that, especially because I'm abstracting it, might be similar to a photo I took in Death Valley
Yeah.
of a small scene of a plant or something,
Right.
or a succulent that I took at the local botanical garden could have been taken in Arizona. So there's, I think that part of the reason I'm drawn to that abstraction is because that means there is something to photograph everywhere. It doesn't matter if it's, you know, uninspiring. It doesn't matter if it's epic. It doesn't matter if it's the alley across the street or in my basement. I've taken photos that have placed in photography contests that I literally took right here where I'm sitting at my kitchen table.
Yeah.
Took the photo in the kitchen or in the basement. And so I think it has, and winters and like the seasons and whatnot. And I'm not a big get out in the snow and ice kind of person.
Hmm.
So I'm more likely to try to find photography projects and subjects that I can do here in my home.
Yeah.
So I think that's how the environment has shaped what I choose to experiment with.
Hmm.
And it makes it sound like I'm I'm seeing things as limited, but really it's no, there's like limitless things to take photos of.
Yeah.
It's just I've chosen, I think that the abstraction is one way I get around I don't have unlimited resources to travel all the time. And I don't live someplace where there's like an epic mountain range 5 miles away.
Yep. I get it. Yeah. Do you have a favorite spot that just keeps calling you back?
I do love Death Valley. I've been there only twice. Have you been to Death Valley?
No, I've never made it. I've been to Utah, Salt Lake City, and a couple of other
Mm,
places there.
hmm.
I've been to a couple of places in Texas and some places on both the
Yeah,
east and west
the
coast, but I haven't
coasts.
made it to Death Valley yet.
Yeah, I highly recommend it.
It's on the list.
It's it's on the list, yeah. And I've never been to White Sands National Park, but I really would like to go there. I've interviewed several photographers who've been there, and they all say it broke me,
Yeah,
which is wow, okay, I really want to go there now. Um, but there's something about that landscape and the diversity of it and the vastness of it and the openness of it
yeah,
that is compelling. And it's a place, part of it's I think it's a millions of acres.
yeah.
It's thousands of miles, millions of acres. And you don't really have cell service except in a couple of spots that are more civilized.
Mm,
You're just out there. And the rest of the world just completely goes away. And
yeah.
that's the other thing I like. It's like you're just immersed. You're there, and that's the only place you are.
Mm.
So that really, yeah, that speaks to me. And then on the other flip side, the other place I love that I'm always drawn to is downtown Chicago.
Okay.
And that's the architecture side
Yeah,
of me
right.
that loves it's just a fantastic cityscape
Yeah.
that every time I go, there's always I come home with thousands of photos that
Mm.
I'm excited to try to go through and find the gems. And yeah, that's the other another happy place.
Awesome. What's your most memorable photography experience?
Really, I think it goes back to Death Valley the first time I
Yeah.
went there. I was there in January, late January of 2023, so not even 2 years ago. And it was a workshop run by TJ Thorne and Alex Noriega, both of
Yep.
whom I know you've spoken with.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that is that again, Sarah Marino was talking about Death Valley at a conference I was at, and just listening to her talk about it and how in love she was with it made me like, oh, I have to go there. I'm not sure why, but I need to go there.
Sure. Sure.
And so when Alex and TJ had that offering, I signed up, and it was only later that I was like, oh, wait a minute. This is a landscape workshop. And I haven't done much landscape photography. Am I going to know what I'm doing? And not that you need to know what you're doing before you go to a
Yeah.
workshop, because that's one of the reasons you go to a
I was
workshop
going to say, isn't that the point
to
of
learn,
the
to learn. But I thought other people there would probably have way more experience with landscape than I would. But it was truly a transformative experience, not just because of Death Valley, but because of Alex and TJ and their teaching and mentorship. And it really, I think I shared a photo or two, a few photos with you from
Yep.
that time in Death Valley. That it it really, oh, I hate that phrase, next level, but I do feel like it took my photography to it inched it up a notch,
Yeah.
and it certainly boosted my confidence
Yeah. I can see
because
why.
it was this totally outside my comfort zone experience that I was able to navigate and enjoy and come away with some photos that I absolutely love.
Awesome. What about horror stories? Any dramatic things happen?
Any horror stories? Death Valley? No, I when I went to Death Valley, I had a really bad hip. And so it was a very physical workshop, and I was in a lot of pain. And so I managed everything. And fortunately, there was the wife of one of the other workshop participants who was just tagging along and doing her own thing. She's 70 years old and she described herself as the Energizer Bunny. Like she had so much energy. And she
Yeah.
said, "Here, let me carry your pack." And so she was my Sherpa for a lot of the trip. I probably literally could not have done that workshop without her
Yeah.
help. And so it came up as horror story just in terms of it was times painful. At times I wondered, am I going to be able to do this thing that we're supposed to be doing? Because I don't know that I can make it. But I learned I pushed through. I got a hip replacement within the year. So the pain was real. And I think Death Valley pushed it over the edge to
Yeah.
where that hip replacement had to happen sooner rather than later. I'm almost positive. But yeah, that was a horror story. I don't know, but it was definitely
Painful experience.
oh, a painful, challenging, stretching experience. The other time was, and I would never recommend this, I got a new camera.
Hmm.
And that same day, I was driving to go photograph an event, and I decided to use the new camera at the event. You can see where this is maybe going.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it was a surprise party for somebody, a surprise birthday
Let,
party.
let me
And
guess, it was a brand of camera you'd never used before?
I had never used it. It was a Canon. I was going from a Canon R to an R5.
Oh,
So it had a very similar setup, but some differences, right?
the menu's
Um,
familiar, but yeah, there's definitely
yeah, but
differences there.
so I probably had an hour with it before I was going
Wow.
to photograph this event. And the person who hired me said, "Okay, here are some of the photos I want. And I definitely want my husband, when he walks through the door, surprised."
Yep.
And so I'm there, I'm getting it, or whatever. I get back home and all of the photos are there except for
Oh, you're
that
joking.
moment. None of those were, it skipped from 334 to 557 in the numbering.
Wow.
And no matter what I did, I was like, I didn't know. And I came to figure out what happened was that my memory card wasn't fast enough. And so it
Buffer.
was buffering. I thought it was shooting, it was buffering, and none of them. And of course, nobody else at the party was taking photos because I was taking photos. Another cautionary tale: never take a new camera, even if you feel like you're going to be familiar with it. I wasn't ready for the leap in speed
Yeah.
of the R5 compared to the R, and that the memory card was not going to be fast enough.
Yeah.
So that was a horror story.
Yeah. I was doing it as a bit of a photo walk with and a promotional thing with Canon with the R5 Mark II, and
Mm,
I was a bit lost with that for about half an hour, working my way through
yeah.
and trying to work out, okay, all the pre-shooting and everything that it does. It was like, I know I was very glad that I hadn't done something like that and gone to an event with
Something
it.
stupid like I did.
Yeah. 'Cause if I had, I don't know that I would have been getting paid.
Yeah, I mean, I let my excitement, like I'm not a gear geek or anything, but who doesn't get excited when they get a new camera?
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I was like, "Ooh, I get to give it a test run." It's like, no, don't test run it when somebody's paying you.
No, that's exactly it.
That's dumb. And fortunately, the woman who hired me was totally cool and she wasn't mad. I within reason, I fell all over myself apologizing. And she was like, "I get it. It's okay. No worries." And she was sincere about it. And so I've
It's
seen her
nice when you've got
since.
a nice client.
Yes, I only hope to work with nice clients.
Talking about the processing side of things, are you straight into processing when you get the camera home? Are you straight into edit mode, or do you leave things to marinate for a while?
Yeah, this is something I've been, another thing that I've been experimenting with a bit. I'm usually a rush home, pop it into the computer, load it into Lightroom, scan through, pick out things, quickly process whatever I'm most excited about, share it, and then come back to it. I've been trying, though, to practice that patience that I was talking about earlier with just giving it some space.
Yeah.
One of the best things one of the best experiences I had was earlier this year. I made a trip to Death Valley. I was just there like a day and a half, and I was going to Las Vegas actually, and I did not want to bring my computer. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to take photos at one of my favorite places on earth, and I'm not going to be able to see them for 5 days.
Yep.
Am I okay with that? And it's, yeah, I need to be okay with that. And so that was like an experiment of what did it feel like to take photos that I knew I would be excited to see, but that I would have this delayed gratification. And and it was good. And what was interesting was I was I had more distance from the images. I was less emotionally attached. And it was nice because I got to relive, oh, yeah, that's right. I stopped there. And oh, yeah, I remembered that. So I think that yeah, I'm trying to practice having a little bit of distance, unless I'm just really super excited about
Yeah.
it. And there have been those images where it's like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait till I get home and pop this in and see. But otherwise, I'm trying to give it some breathing room.
Yeah. I'm a bit the same. I sometimes leave things for a while. Other times it's straight into it. It used to be anyway before I actually had a laptop, and I would go overseas, for example, and do a trip, and it might be 5 or 6 weeks by the time I got back before I
Mm.
actually get to look at them. So that definitely taught patience and
Yes.
gave me again that feeling of reliving the experience as well, which I think
Hmm.
is fabulous. Do you print
Yeah.
much of your work
One,
at all?
say that again.
I was just going to ask, do you print much of your work at all?
I've been trying to get better about that. I don't print it at home because I just don't have the
Sure.
proper equipment. And I've thought about, do you print a lot?
I print test prints because I've got a
Hmm.
printer that just does A4. It doesn't do anything big enough for me to get
Hmm.
excited about. But I do that mainly
Hmm.
to make sure that before I send it off to the pros, that I'm happy
Hmm.
with how the colors are going to turn out.
Yeah,
Because
that's smart.
yeah, for me, if it looks okay on a page that I can print here on the A4 and the colors match what I've got on the screen, then I'm comfortable in sending it off because I
Yeah.
have learned, and it's a costly lesson to learn if you send it off and you've got this big print and the greens are off or the blues are off or whatever, and you go,
Hmm.
I've just spent a couple $100 on that, and that doesn't really
Yep, exactly.
do what I want.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, our printer is not, it's not a great photo printer. And I've thought about, do I invest, going back to that, how much do you invest in yourself and what do you
Yeah,
choose to invest in? I've thought about, okay, do I want to invest in a good printer, above average printer where it's, I feel like I can print things that I could
yeah.
sell, and of course getting the right paper and all of that. And then I thought about it, I thought it that's a, maybe I'm overestimating how much you need to know about printing and colors and all of that kind of
It's a dark
stuff. But
art.
it's an art, yeah, dark art, yeah. And I'm like, I don't know
I
if I want
don't
to go
know
into the
anywhere
dark
near
arts.
enough about it, which is why when I'm doing something for a client, then it goes
It
off to
goes
the
off.
pros and they look after.
Exactly.
If it's me wanting to
Yeah.
just have a look, then I'll do it myself.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I just thought, I don't know that I want to spend thousands of dollars and
Yeah,
have
that's the
equipment
other
that
thing.
I don't know how to use
And particularly when you
properly.
get into the larger format, I think
Yes.
the latest large format Canon 1000R or something, it's something like
Hmm.
about eight, or I forget exactly what the designation is, but anyway, it's something like 700 or 800 bucks worth of ink every time you top up the ink.
Yeah. And you might only get 10 or 20 prints out of that
Exactly.
ink because
Yeah,
of what you're doing and the size of it. To me, I just am like, I'll trust the pros and
I'm the
send
same.
it off when I get it. But this is making me think about, it is time probably to get a better printer. Doesn't
Sure.
have to be the top of the line thousands of dollars, but something that does allow me to print. Because in addition to doing that sort of test before you send it off to the pros, there's also just that value of printing out your work and seeing it, and
Yeah.
even laying it out and getting away from the screen. And yeah,
Yeah, it's a completely
there's no
different
replacement
experience.
for that.
I print a lot
Hmm.
of books, mostly just
Mm.
for personal use, and it's usually a mixture of phone shots and candid shots
Hmm.
with family and so forth. But I do that whenever we go away. We do
Hmm.
a book of that trip, and sometimes I might do an art book for a year. This is my
Hmm.
year, just so that I can look back and go, okay, this is what it looked like in 2024. This is what it looked like in 2021, and so forth. And you can see,
Yeah.
oh, there's progress.
Yeah. I've done a few of those photo books, but it's been a little while. I feel you're
Yeah.
again reminding me
Well,
like, oh, that
it's
would be
just
kind of a fun
I see
project.
it like a photo album. I've
Yeah,
down
exactly.
in this bookcase. I've got lots of photo albums from the 80s and 90s, which are
Mm.
stuff full of
Mm.
the 4x8 prints, you know.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Uh,
Yeah.
we talked a little bit about you seeing the value of photography in society and so forth and how important it is. I'm interested in what is the biggest challenges in photography at the moment.
Does everybody, if you ask
Lots
this
of people
question,
say
they would say
AI.
AI. I
I
know.
personally have a different opinion. I
Yeah,
see I see AI as a challenge. Do I see it as the biggest challenge? No. For me, the biggest
right.
challenge is actually climate change.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is closer to that. I do have concerns about AI. I have frustrations with AI.
Yeah.
I love it as a tool in Photoshop to help me clone something out better,
Yeah.
or but I refuse. I honestly, it doesn't matter if it's a chat bot on Google or letting AI do something. I don't want. I just don't want it. And I'm not technology averse. I love technology. I love to leverage what's there, and there's something in me that is just very resistant to some of the more the parts where it's trying to co-opt our thinking and
Yeah.
our creativity.
I
Where
personally
it's
don't
like,
like,
let me do it for you.
yeah, I don't like the shoving of it down people's throats where it's
Right.
now become the standard offering. Microsoft is doing it,
Right.
Apple is doing it, Google is doing it, everyone, Samsung, every tech company out
Yeah.
there is very excited about it and they see dollar signs. And I get it, but
Yeah.
I think there should be an opt out. I don't want it. So don't put it in my phone.
Exactly.
Don't put it in
Right.
my operating system, etc.
Yeah.
Unless I want to use it, why should I be forced to?
Yeah. 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 So maybe we're identifying it mostly right now as a nuisance that has the potential to become a threat because I have heard in terms of not just photography but just from a societal perspective,
Yep.
AI is according to some futurists and whatnot like the biggest existential threat that humanity faces right now.
Sure.
So it's hard not to look at it and have that. those thoughts when it comes to photography. And your point about climate change, the other thing that comes up is social media, in that it is sending people to locations, people, influencers, and all of that kind of stuff. They're ruining landmarks, historic sites, national parks,
Yeah.
just doing dumb stuff. And I get it. And everybody wants to enjoy someplace beautiful. They want to share it.
Totally.
Just people not being smart about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe the biggest threat to photography is people.
I like that. I might
How's
that
that?
to
How's
the
that?
top of the list. Yeah.
Oh,
What
yeah. Say that again.
what do you see as the future of photography?
My hope, and this is the optimistic side of the
Sure.
AI threat, is that we swing back the pendulum to ultra authenticity,
Mm, mm,
that we prize the real deal much
yeah.
more, and that photography is one of the most accessible and transmittable ways to capture that reality.
Sure.
So my hope is, the optimistic side of me says, instead of becoming obsolete, it might become more important, because we're going to value those real authentic moments
Yeah.
even more. Yeah, I just think that's my optimistic view on my best day.
Fantastic. What's the best thing about being a photographer?
For me personally, the best thing is that it gets me out of bed. It gets
Cool.
me out in the world. It acts, it's a catalyst for connection.
Mm,
This is another thing I was talking with someone else about the other day, that some people might see like the camera as a barrier, like you're putting something between you and the world, or you and other people.
sure. Sure.
For me, I've had the opposite experience, where it actually puts me more into the world.
Yeah.
It makes me notice more. It makes me look deeper. It connects me with people. It causes conversations I never would have had otherwise.
Mhm.
Um, it gives me a sense of purpose, and it just gives me an outlet for expression, that is that the act of doing it is just as, if not more, rewarding than the act of sharing. To
Yeah.
me, both are important. I could never be a photographer and never share my work. To me, that's part of the generative cycle of giving and receiving and honoring, and all
Mm,
of the things that we've been talking about. That has to happen in order for it all to be complete for me.
yeah.
But the gift of photography is just as much in the moment of being out with the camera, seeing, composing, thinking, visualizing, pressing the shutter, getting excited.
Awesome.
Um, yeah,
Fantastic. What about the worst thing? What's the worst thing about being a photographer?
it's expensive.
Yes. True.
It's expensive. I said that jokingly, but in some ways, there is some truth to it. It doesn't have to be, because there's an amazing amount we can do with inexpensive equipment, inexpensive software, with your
Yeah.
iPhone, all of that kind of stuff. But I would say that is something of a barrier. I think oh, I, do I really say what I'm thinking?
Go on.
Which
You
is,
can edit it out if it's really bad.
I was joking. What's the biggest threat to photography? People. What's the worst thing about being a photographer? People. They're both the best and the worst, because there are so many who are generous, who are collaborative, who are open and friendly and supportive, encouraging. And then, this is probably true in any profession. I notice it because this is where I'm noticing it, is there's also some toxic people. There are people that
Absolutely.
are just looking to tear other people down,
Yeah.
to nitpick, to pixel peep, and do all those kinds of things. And it just serves no purpose.
No.
And it's, it, yeah, that kind of toxicity, it's just like, I just feel like it has no place. It just doesn't have any place. And yeah, I hate to say it, but that is one of the worst
No,
things is
that's fair
you
enough.
never quite know where you're safe, and you have
Yeah.
to find your safe places. And if you stay safe, that might limit you, but then you open yourself up, and you're going to start, the more you do that, the more you're going to start encountering those people who are insecure and only feel good about themselves if they're tearing someone else down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I see those people in that way, that they're the ones with the problem. And
oh yeah, yeah.
I've also found that the percentage of them compared to the people that are generous and
Hmm.
honest about what they're
It's
doing,
small,
they're a very small percentage.
but they're noisy sometimes.
Yeah, this is the thing, is that you can put something out there and you have 101 marvelous
Hmm.
comments, and you get one that says something negative, and what's the one you remember?
Exactly. That is exactly it. Our minds are,
And
yeah,
I
we're
don't
we're
think
sort of
that's
wired.
restricted to photography as well, right
No,
across careers and
it
people's
is.
lives and everything.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's why I hesitate to say, is that the worst thing? Because that's something that a lot of,
Yeah.
especially creative avenue professions and spaces have in common. Everybody's got their trolls and
Absolutely.
their naysayers and their toxic attitudes and their arrogance.
Mm.
But so I hesitate to say that's the worst thing, but it's the thing that's out there that is that can really dampen people's spirits and enthusiasm. I've heard of people saying, "Oh, I got this feedback at a camera club and it made me quit, or it
Yeah,
made me
I
think that
think
my
that sort of
images are rubbish."
yeah is no good. But I also look at it, if you're not being criticized, then you're probably not trying hard enough.
Right. In some ways, criticism, yeah, and there's an art to constructive feedback.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And a lot of folks don't realize that there's actually a way to do it that is both honest and direct and supportive,
Yeah.
and that won't kill somebody's spirit. So sometimes there's an assumption, and again, this goes across all creative fields and probably in other fields. Just because somebody's good at something doesn't mean that they know how to give feedback.
No.
And so I think that just a little bit of humility and recognizing that there is an art to that could go a long way in helping people at all phases in their journey to feel like they're getting solid, supportive feedback that's going to help them grow without killing their spirit.
Yeah, definitely. I got a couple more questions for you, and this one I almost always ask now. What's the best or worst piece of advice that anyone's ever given you?
It's funny because this is one of the questions I sometimes ask my guests. So now I have to think about it for myself.
It's always fun being on the
Um,
other side of the mic, isn't it?
I know, right? It's like, oh, darn, I have to think about this now for myself. I think the best advice has been, and I think this has come from multiple places,
Hmm.
but not to put my photography in a box that
Yeah.
is like limiting what it is I photograph, how I photograph it, whatever. It's more like the best advice has been permission to follow whatever it is that's drawing my eye and not worry about um, having an area of expertise or niche or whatever, being known for a particular thing.
Sure, sure.
I do think there's value in that, and I have preached that myself.
Hmm.
Um, and to me, it's a yes and. Yes, find it's valuable to find what it is that you are maybe particularly in tune with
Yep,
and
yep.
have an affinity for and want to explore deeper and maybe be known for.
Mm.
And that is not all you are.
Absolutely.
That's not all I am. I am not just abstract. I am not just fill in the blank. So I think it's that the best advice, like I said, it's come from, I've absorbed it from multiple voices, which
Mm.
is just permission to not specialize and to explore and let perhaps the style be the specialty,
Sure, sure.
not the subject, not the genre,
Yeah,
whatever. So just to be open.
yeah. I think that's fantastic advice. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Welcome.
Are
Thank
there
you to
any
who big all those places they came to me from.
are there any photographers out there that you think I need to be talking to? I know there's lots, but and there's
Oh
probably
yeah, there's lots. And without knowing, since you have 170 plus episodes of folks that you've talked to, and I would definitely, I love Colleen Minnick.
okay. Yep.
Have you spoken with her?
Uh, she's hasn't appeared on my list yet.
Okay, so Colleen, she is US based and landscape and nature photographer, and she just published a book
Nice.
recently. And so I think she's super smart, wonderful photographer, very thoughtful, loads of wisdom. So definitely Colleen. And Guy Tall, have
Yep.
you spoken with him?
No, I haven't
Okay.
spoken with him, but he
Okay.
is on my list. Yes.
Okay, good. And I'm just going to reach across here because it came today. His latest book, let's see, is called Whoops, it's not going to do it because of the virtual background, but it's called Be Extraordinary
Yeah.
and Philosophical Advice for Photographic and Other Artists. Um, so I know that he's diving more into philosophy and creativity and ethics and fantastic photographer and super deep thinker and very generous spirit. So
Fabulous.
he's another one that I would recommend.
All right.
And
Thank
I'm
you.
sure there are others, but they're the ones that come up
No,
top of mind.
fantastic.
And Stephanie Johnson,
Oh,
if
okay.
you haven't spoken with her.
No, I haven't.
All right, she's another abstract photographer. Of all the photographers I have followed over the past few years, she's the one I have seen the biggest evolution of her work over time.
Hmm.
Just an amazing artistry, very creative, very out of the box, and also again very thoughtful.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. I've got one
Yeah.
more question, and for many people, it's the most important one that I ask. It's a problem that I've been trying to get to the bottom of since the beginning of this podcast. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
No, I love pineapple though.
Okay.
Pineapple is like one of my favorite fruits,
Nice.
but not on pizza. I
Okay.
have had pineapple though in Thai food, and that works.
Yeah, pineapple fried rice is a favorite. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, the pineapple on pizza, I don't know. I can't bring myself to do it. Sorry.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. It's been wonderful getting to know you better and learning more about what you do. Where can people
Thank
find
you.
your work?
I'm most active on Instagram, so you can find me at Beth Buelow Photo. I also have a website, of course, bethbuelowphotography.com. And as we spoke a little bit about in the course of our conversation, I have a podcast called Pixels.
Hmm?
The full title is Pixels Exploring the Heart and Art of Photography. It's features primarily interviews with other photographers with the occasional solo commentary episode that gets posted. And that's available on YouTube and audio versions on hopefully wherever you get your podcasts.
Fantastic. All right. I definitely recommend anyone that enjoyed this interview and enjoys my show to take a listen or a look at Beth's Pixels podcast. It's really fantastic. She's spoken to some amazing guests, and I wish you all the best with how it goes in the future.
Thank you. Same to you. And it's great to know that there's these voices out here that are talking about the meaning, the motivations, not about the gear.
Yeah. I got no interest
So
in
I'm
talking to people about gear.
no, I really don't have any interest in gear. So thank you for being in that space too.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Beth.
Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at gruntswinburnphotography.com, along with prints, photography gear, and my 2025 calendar. I'm also on Vero, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and also Photo now. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.